good afternoon, good morning, good evening, or whatever time zone it is, wherever you in the world. It is your Lore Saviour, and a particularly noisy, snory Holly, where today we're both going to be talking about the Alien film franchise, which is a little unusual for the channel's general themes and conversations, because we don't typically explore films on this channel. We usually talk about horror-related things, and TTRPG and horror TTRPG-related things. So I suppose the Alien films does fit into the horror part of it, but how does it fit into the TTRPG element of things? Well, the early December 2025 in the Everlord Talos, I paid a visit to my local game store, and as one would expect, it was filled with all sorts of Dungeons and Dragons related paraphernalia. But the thing that really caught me off guard is that seemingly everywhere it was chock-a-block with the latest printing of the Alien RPG by Free League, the Evolved Edition. And I say the latest printing because this is technically version 1.5. Version 1 is like going to be up there or maybe over there on the screen, where Free League Publishing, the developers and surprisingly the publishers of this TTRPG, refined the mechanics, refined a new stealth mechanic and just like tightened that up a little bit more, redid the entire presentation and just made it a lot more accessible and present a pretty good TTRPG, a much needed polish overall. I won't give too much of a review of the TTRPG at the moment, but I think it's a pretty good thing that they've done within this edition of the Alien TTRPG. So I bought the TTRPG alongside the Games Master or Game Mother screen as it's referred to with this, and I started to read the first chapter of this book, and I then realised I apparently didn't know much about the Alien franchise, which might seem a bit weird. Well, surely you'd have to know about the Alien films before you play the fucking TTRPG, but you'd be surprised how many people play TTRPGs and not really reading the core book and just fucking winning it. But that's not what I was trying to do. I just didn't realise that there was a lot more to this setting, which I just presumed that it would just follow through the same sort of format as the first one. But no, apparently there's these corporations, there's a lot of lore, a lot of meta plot, and all these different elements that I was just very overwhelmed with at the beginning reading this in the first chapter. I suppose now would be an absolutely amazing time to mention, because apparently I didn't do that in the fucking video proper, that Alien is the only film I had watched within the franchise properly up until that point, and I realised fairly recently that it's actually one of my most favourite films, because it's one of those things that I would sit down and watch regardless to how much time was left, whether it be 60 minutes or 10 minutes, I would like devote my full attention to this absolute masterclass in horror, I feel. It's actually one of the few films I actually willingly went to the cinema before I had like my resurgence, as it were, like being more engaged with cinema. When I was at uni about 7, 8-ish years ago at this point, maths has never been my strong point. The Alien film, the first one, was having like an anniversary for like 40 or 50 year anniversary. I can't quite remember what anniversary that it was, and I saw it with a friend from uni at the local cinema, and it was one of the coolest fucking experiences I've ever seen in a film. Like, if you ever get a chance to see something like that in the cinema, please fucking go, because it's you think you had a fun time with your fucking headphones or the TV speakers, it pales in fucking comparison to watching something like that in the fucking cinema. So yeah, I'd always had some interest in running the TTRPG, the Alien TTRPG, I said, because of my interest in Alien via the first one. But then they announced they were going to do the second one, i.e. version 1.2. I thought I might as well just wait and see what they did with that before going to make the big plunge. And I then realised I actually needed to get on that bucket list of mine and actually start watching the rest of the Alien films, which is something I've wanted to do for ages, but wanting to run and play this TTRPG now, I thought now was a great time to sit down and watch the Alien films back to back and see what I made of them. And as of the recording of this video, the 17th of December 2025, there are currently 7 Alien TTRPGs. This one has Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, Prometheus and Covenant, and this one is the latest Alien film as of the recording, Romulus. So if there are any other films that come out in the future, don't be a fucking smart ass and tell me that I've missed one, why I haven't talked about such and such. And on a similar note, I haven't seen Alien Earth yet, the Alien TV show that's on Disney Plus or whatever it's called. I don't particularly want to subscribe to Disney and give them my money on a drip-fed based basis, but that being said, if there's going to be like a DVD box set in the future where I can just buy the things and watch things en masse, I will reluctantly do that. I guess, and see what I think about that TV series sometime in the future. But if it's going to be one of those instances where it's never going to end, it's going to be like a billion fucking seasons, and fuck that, I'm just going to nope the fuck out of that one. So we'll see what happens with that. So that's really going to be the whole focus of this video, just me waffling and rambling about the 7 main, as of recording this video, Alien films. None of the Alien vs Predator stuff, none of the comics, none of the books, none of the video games, just the main core films. I don't really have much of a plan or structure about going and doing this, other than just like go through in some logical order and then just like add bits as they come to me. So let us start with the very first of these films, Alien. And why is it one of my most favourite films of all time? Well, I think as horror goes, it's basically a masterclass about what to do, how it does a great job setting up the suspense, the terror and the dread of the xenomorph, this hostile planet. And I particularly like the lighting that's used throughout that as well. Like within the Nostromo, you have that very clinical white, and I guess in some places industrial little tones of the buttons and screens to represent like the clinical coldness of the corporation, or the company as it's referred to here, which we know as Weyland-Yutani. And then on the outside of the alien world and the xenomorph itself is gorgeously designed by H.G. Geiger. I cannot put to words how much I love his artwork and his just vision and direction, just a pure illogical alien madness to it all. I just think that is just so fucking awesome. But with the xenomorph and the alien planet surrounding that, it's very cold and dark and blue. And I bet if you were to line like the film up in like frame order, you'd probably get like a very interesting mix of like whites and blues. Interesting enough, I find a similar sort of thing can be said with Aliens and Alien 3. Particularly with Alien 3, you've got far more like rustic colours because of the like prison planet that they're on, just to show like the decay, the entropy, and just the stagnation of everything around them, that they don't really have much chance of escape. This is where they're going to die, etc. and so forth. And Alien seems to be a bit of a blend between the two of them, sort of like the dark, almost rustic nature of like the base planet thing that's around them, the cold winter nights of the like ongoing storm, and of course the xenomorph proper. But with the first Alien here, I felt it was a bit more subtle, probably because I was looking at it more when I was watching Aliens and Alien 3 and just being more aware of it. But whereas the first Alien film, which was something that sort of came over me over time, just watching it again and again. I love how human it all is. I love that this isn't like your grand space opera, like discovering new worlds and like colonizing everything, which is something that it's kind of explored in all of them, but it's really more of a focus on Prometheus and a little bit in Covenant as well, which I will talk about later on. But if I was to distill the Alien films really fucking badly, perhaps bluntly, it is sci-fi space truckers who are doing a dangerous job moving cargo from one place to the next, and they have to go and deal with the shit that comes forth at them. I suppose the series would work just as well if they were exploring the oceans, but rather than dealing with an alien species, it would be like some weird like Lovecraftian creature at the bottom of the sea, or maybe an oil rig would actually be a better situation for that, because everything's just about to blow, or could blow at any given moment, and when things go bad, things go really bad really fucking quickly. But keeping with that space truck analogy, whether they are literally just a group of people moving cargo across, whether they're a bunch of colonial marines and marshals, or whether they're just people trying to find a new world, it's just they are people in a big grey rustic, boring looking spaceship. Yeah, the spaceship looked grand and everything, but it's not like brightly coloured with like racing stripes and green. It doesn't feel very cartoony. It's just a grey hunk of metal, because the companies and corporations not wanting to spend too much money painting all that shit up, shit that's going to be destroyed anyway, or could be destroyed. Everything doesn't have like super fancy force fields that deflect blasters or anything. You don't actually see any space fights across any of the Alien films. It's just anything and everything will just fuck up everyone very fucking quickly. Like, there's a real sense of urgency being hit by asteroids, and if any of the characters are using guns within the ships, they have to be really careful. You know, they're going to blow fucking huge holes in everything. The xenomorph having acid blood is a real danger, not just because it burns through people, because it's burning through the ship, and it may potentially blow through holes in the ship and cause lots of damage that way. Well, beyond actually just going through and like fucking up materials, it's really horrifying just how grounded everything is, even though it's an alternate future where, quite frankly, I don't think any of that stuff is ever going to happen anyway, or at least not in my fucking lifetime, which is, of course, assuming that I'm going to stay around to the fucking 2100s. That would be a real fucking morbid thing indeed. But, you know, I can't see that ever happening. But the way that the sci-fi world is presented within the Alien and the Aliens films thereafter, it does feel very grounded. It does feel believable, and the cast reflect that as well. Like, they're just going through the motions of a job. They're not really too happy to be there, other than some of the stuff in Prometheus and a little bit in Covenant, but I'll talk a bit more about that later. They are just there to do a job, and different people throughout the films show different levels of interest with the company. Some of them are there for ulterior motives, some of them are happy to be on board, but most of them are just very about doing this job, and because of the nature of the cryosleep, they don't really know each other. Just because, you know, they're familiar, they're not really familiar faces, and they only trust each other as much as they have to get a fucking job done. There's some, like, relationships, like there's Ripley and there's the, like, main captain guy who, with the flamethrower, who then gets destroyed by the xenomorph in the middle of the film. Like, there's an element that they know each other, but it's just a bunch of workers that have to get on and do with a job. It's not like a close, tight-knit family thing, and also with the cryo chamber things, it introduces the horror from the get-go, like, how long have they been asleep for? What are the effects that this could have if things go awry? Which is something that's actually explored a little bit in all the films thereafter, because follow a formula where Ripley goes through an escape pod, cryo chamber freezes sort of stuff, and then wakes up X number of years later. Because from Alien to Aliens, it's about 50 odd years. Not as much time passes between Aliens and Alien 3, although I can't exactly remember the actual time jump. But from Alien 3 to Resurrection is 200 years. Which is a fucking long-ass time, and that's not really explored at all that well, but that's just like one of the many flaws I have with Alien Resurrection, which I would just say now I did not think was a very good film. I think at that point Ripley should have just been fucking retired from the films, because the character we get in that is maybe Ripley, but it's not Ripley by name. If anything, it was a bit of a fucking push with Alien 3 anyway. But I think Alien Resurrection is so badly 90s. It's got so many different weird audio issues and weird lighting choices as well. I mean, I do like sort of like the decrepit, rustic, like brown shit fest nature of things, but I think that's just more of an aesthetic choice rather than anything that's truly deliberate to portray a certain feeling for it, other than a bit of foreshadowing that everything's just going to be a bit fucking shit. But rewinding a little bit back from Alien to Aliens, the concept of trauma is really explored nicely in that Ripley doesn't trust the synth right up until the end. She's fucking frightened of the xenomorph, and no one's really listening to her all the way through this. It's just these colonial marines don't have a fucking clue what they're doing, and the guy that's calling the shot is like fucking incompetent, but they're on a mission to do. Why would they let, you know, the advisor control things, especially the fact the advisor was a woman, an older woman, where at that sort of role, women are supposed to take a fucking backseat as well. They're ignored, they're neglected, they don't really have much of an opinion on things, etc. and so forth. But going back to like the actual time jump cryo chamber things, you don't see it with like the main theatrical cut of the film. If you see the director's cut, and whether you want to treat that as canon or not, which I suppose it is given the existence of Alien Isolation, Ripley actually has a daughter who has like grown up, had their life without her, and is dead. And you see quite an appropriate amount of sadness and trauma from all of that wanted to try and get home, but obviously there's no fucking point going home now to the daughter because they've lived a life and they're fucking dead, which is so fucking tragic. And I'm a bit confused why that of all things was cut from the film, even perhaps not to the full scene, because I do think it seems a bit ass in terms of performance, but there is something really interesting there that they could have included there just to give Ripley a bit more humanity. And it would have been nice if they were going to go down that route, they would have mentioned it someplace, somehow, in the original film, because no children or anything are mentioned in those films, so it just feels like a bit of a fucking curveball that Ripley now has this child that's so important to her, but yet never got a fucking mention in the first film. Like, that just seems a bit fucking weird. Even if it's like a throwaway line, I've got to get out of here, I've got to get back to my daughter sort of thing, except, you know, even if it's something like that, just would have added so much to things, but alas, they did not. And as I'm talking about Aliens now, I think I should just move a little bit further on to Aliens. But before I do that, I will just say I absolutely love the music of the first one. Like, Jerry Goldsmith is like one of the greatest film composers that have ever existed. A huge inspiration for myself in terms of audio sound stuff. But it's also really impressive to see that in that film, there is so little music, and it's all done in all the right places. Where with some of the later Alien films, I feel they had that problem where it's a horror and action sort of thing, so you've got to have like a fucking full brass Hans Zimmer, like action strings, percussion, all weird chaotic noises to show that it's all chaotic and action stuff, etc. and so forth. I'm particularly looking at you, Covenant. You're the worst fucking example of this. Benjamin Wallfish, fucking Zimmer prodigy. No shade on him. I just think that the Zimmerman-isms in modern Hollywood is like completely fucking ruined soundtracks as a whole, but that is a conversation for a different fucking time, possibly on a different channel, because I can't quite to see how that would work in this fucking channel, but I digress. The score of Alien is so minimal. Yeah, you have like these like typical horror moments, but the iconic little flutes that play with the introduction of the xenomorph or anything surrounding like it's just so effective because it's quiet, it's restrained, it's not like a heroic ostinato, it's not something intentionally horrific, it's ominous, it's in the background, it's weak sounding, but it's just there, stalking you, it's just there. It doesn't get in your face, but it's just these few little notes. It's just so fucking effective, and it's something that I feel that a lot of fucking composers / directors, because it's the directors that call in the shots, really just kind of miss that. Yeah, you got the flutes that are introduced here and there, just to remind you that you are watching an Alien film, even if some of them don't feel like you're watching an Alien film sometimes, but I'll get onto that idea of an Alien film in just a moment. It's just such an effective score, particularly the fact that there is so little of it, that it's not in your face all the time. It just lets the ship's mechanisms, the hissing, the whirrings, and the characters fill up the spectrum of sound a lot more, so it just feels a lot more like these workers living out their lives, just doing a gig, and then when things have to be ramped up in tension, the music may come into play here, but it doesn't always. And again, it's just so effective that how silence in the score just makes shit more frightening, and just letting the natural world around them do the speaking for them. It's fucking reason why Jerry Goldsmith is as fucking great as he is, because it's just, I could go on about that all day, but I really do need to move on to the other films. Aliens I wasn't expecting to like as much, because I was aware it was going to be more action focused, and being in the product of an 80s, it was going to be very over the top and bombastic, and I thought I wasn't going to like it as much because it was going to detract a lot more from the horror, which admittedly it was very bombastic, over the top, and it did feel very much a product of the 80s, but at the same time it still managed to feel like part of the Alien franchise that was established in the first one. It was basically soldiers coming in to do a clean-up job as a rescue mission or whatever. And even though you have far more xenomorphs, more eggs, and the introduction of the Alien Queen, which is by far one of the most fucking frightening monsters I have ever seen in a horror film, purely because of its intelligence. I'm actually going to interrupt myself a bit more, funny surprise that, and actually talk about the xenomorphs proper, because I could not talk about anything alien related and not at least mention the xenomorphs once. You know, as I mentioned just now, the Alien Queen, is one of the most frightening monster designs, and as a concept I've seen, because of its intellect and just its absolute hatred and wanting to kill Ripley, which is understandable because she did kill her fucking babies, you know, maternal instincts and all that. Like, one of the most frightening things in this world is a pissed off mother. I'm just saying, a mother who's got nothing to lose, actually, is probably a better way of wording that. And the xenomorphs aren't that further behind them because of their intellect, but also their pure hatred for everything around them. And there's also an element with some of the chases, particularly in some of the earlier Alien films, where it is truly fucking with them. Like, it could kill them, rip them apart, and do whatever it needs to do as quick as it can, but more often than not, it's taking its time with it. And sure, that's more like a director's horror thing, like building up tension and dread that way around, but they don't need to. It could just be like an animal that just runs and chases after its prey all the time and just rip them apart. But as we see with later films, they're not just trying to kill them, they're trying to use them as like breeding sacks, essentially, with the whole fucking face hugger and also the whole ton in the mouth sort of thing and in the chest and the rest of it, which introduces a very interesting element of the horror I don't see a lot of people talk about, just how phallic it is and how intrusive the alien stuff is, how it leans into a more, I dare say, feminine form of horror, but then again, no one is immune to being raped, but that is something that is seen more with women, unfortunately, and women presenting people. That hasn't occurred to you. Just think of the design of the face hugger, where we see very briefly like the underside, the bit that covers your mouth. It looks like a vagina. It basically face fucks you, deep throats you, and forcibly injects its, well, semen, eggs, whatever the fucking substance matter that's going in there. I don't know the exact terminology, what you just describe how it just fucking impregnates people. The violent bursting of the chest. The phallic design of the xenomorph's head in of itself looks like a curved erect penis. You could say that with the design of the like horseshoe-shaped ship as well, the little gun thing that's in like the middle of the ship that you see in the first one, that then gets explored a bit more with Prometheus. Again, with like the little tongue teeth thing, you could make certain connections with that as well. Like, it's all very phallic, and Romulus, for as much as I love its like homages to the first one, I think it does lean a little bit too much into like the sex symbolism here. Like, it's a bit fucking obvious that we see the xenomorph being burned from an egg, and like how it opens, it looks like a fucking vagina and a clitoris, which I think a lot of men aren't familiar with, but it's very obvious what that looks like and what they're trying to go for here. And some of the scenes, particularly that one face hugger scene with that member of the crew that everybody on fucking Twitter and Blue Sky got really fucking horny about. Yeah, there's nothing hot about that. That's a fucking face rape, my friend. And if you do get caught up and like wrapped out in a suspiciously white substance, you're going to get impregnated that way. And there's other designs you could say regarding the egg and the hatching and all the rest of it. And the weird fucking breeding fetish thing that was happening on with Alien 3. It was Resurrection. They gave the fucking queen a fucking womb. There's a weird amount of foot fetish in that film as well. But yeah, it's real fucking sexual intrusive stuff. And that kind of makes it appealing to me. And I know that's going to make me seem like a very questionable individual. But there are so many really effective horrors and that do lean into the more feminine focused elements of things, like Silent Hill 3, for example, is like one of the greatest horror games they've ever made, but there is no denying that it's a very woman-centric horror based experience. And yeah, I just think the whole design and how the alien works is very unique, it's very intrusive, and it's really effective as a horror, because I don't think it needs to be said, nobody wants to be particularly raped, given the definition of the word in itself. Nobody wants to like go through and birth a child that they don't want to fucking go through, and that's a traumatic process in of itself, even if it's something that you do want. There's a lot of physical trauma and emotional trauma and stuff that happens as well. Like, I'm not a woman or a man who's able to give birth here, so I'm not really capable of having that conversation properly. There's a lot of stuff online that's talked about this stuff properly, but the whole design and the way that the xenomorph operates is just really fucking cool. It's, yeah, I just think it's just a really neat fucking monster design. He says, imitating Marge Simpson with the fucking potato meme. But finally, coming back to Aliens, I was really surprised about how effective it was going to be, because just the overall volume of the xenomorphs and just how they're so relentless. Yeah, easy to wipe out, I guess, because you've got like this top of the grade like military like weapons and the such, but which does show that the aliens can be stopped. There is a means of stopping them, but not without great losses. It's still very difficult to get rid of them, and the Marines are still fucking terrified that they won't be able to survive. They still think that they're not going to be able to, you know, escape this planet and see to the end of it all. But that's in of itself pretty frightening. And Ripley herself really comes into her own a lot more, because in the first film she kind of becomes the hero because everybody's been killed basically, and she does some really cool clever thinking towards the end, and she's a pretty cool badass character because of this. But she really fucking steps up a notch with Aliens, because partly because she has a bit more of experience, but she kind of has to, because nobody really knows what they're doing here, and there is a bit more teamwork here, which is actually something I actually appreciate with the Alien films, because a lot of the time with horror films you've got a group of characters who are trying to fend off on the monster. It's really every man, woman, non-binary person, etc. is in it for themselves. Sometimes you see a little bit of teamwork, even if it's just to run away and just stave them off. But in the Alien films, particularly some of the early ones, there is a sense of teamwork, of people working together to try and to capture and send the fucker into space in one way or another, which again shows off greatly the survival sociability that is the human race. It's just people just working together and like trying to overcome a problem so they can like minimize the damage and the losses, etc., and so forth, which sort of lends into that whole company corporate element of things that makes things very dystopian. Like, I love the teamwork, and I love the synergy between the casts within the first one. I almost enjoy Aliens as much as I enjoy the Alien film. The only things that are stopping me is because I just prefer the sense of the dread and the horror found within the first Alien film. I'm not so keen on the heavy action stuff still, even though it is pretty engaging and frightening in places with the second film. Also, there's little bits of racism and sexism at the second film that I think it could have done without, but being said, it does fit within the setting because most of the colonial marines are based on the army, the American army no less, has a sort of like bro locker room sort of vibe, so there is going to be a little bit of racism and sexism there, particularly towards the one woman within the group who bats it back because she's like one of the lads sort of thing. So I kind of get the vibe of it. I just didn't think it added too much to the film. But that being said, that's a very much a personal preference thing. And it does make sense within the realms of things. I'm not saying that racism and sexism shouldn't exist in films because we need to have these conversations and just highlight things are bad and whatever. I just don't think this actually added much to the film. And even then, it's such a small little thing, even though I may appear to somebody making a mountain out of a molehill. As you will see at the end of the video, where I provide all my reviews on Letterboxd, where I tend to review a lot of these films, I will show you actually what I wrote on there, where I'm able to formulate a response properly and not just rambling away like this. And it does like an out of 5-star rating thing, which is very against how I usually do reviews of things, but you kind of have to with Letterboxd, so that's a thing that happens over there. So you'll see just how little I lock off from the first film. And I do like the fact that Ripley sort of has a bit more of a maternal mother role here, like where she founds this kid called Newt, like wanting to protect and look after the sort of thing, and like who wouldn't want to fucking protect a kid in these sort of situations? And I know that I joke a bit about in videos about like, you know, fuck them kids, get rid of them, they don't matter sort of, and kids should die in horror films if it's relevant to the plot. I actually did a whole video talking about this. I think it works very well here for Ripley to wanting to protect the kid, because there's clearly some sort of affection that's going on, and if you tie that into the director's cut, that does make a lot more sense, that how close they're getting, but at the same time, it kind of makes sense without it. That's not me saying that, you know, women's role in society is to be caring mothers. I'm just saying with the character Ripley is wanting to care and look after people, and it's very clear from how things are bonding between the two of them that she's the only one that's giving the kid the time of day and some patience. But there is a bit more of an added urgency to look after and protect her. And it was also really nice in that film that you had just more than one survivor. You had the other synth, Burke, who wasn't actually an arsehole. He's like one of 2 synths in the whole fucking Alien films who isn't an absolute dick. You have Newt, the kid, and you have Hicks as well. And it was really great seeing them all survive. So you can imagine my frustration that when I started watching Alien 3, that they were all fucking killed within the first 5 fucking minutes of the film. Like, they really wanted Ripley to be the star and not detract from everything, but it just made the ending and the cool epicness of 2 mean absolutely fucking worthless. It just didn't mean anything. It really pissed me off seeing that. And I'm alright with the characters dying like shortly in the film if it made sense, but it didn't really feel like it made a lot of sense here. And Ripley doesn't really have any real reaction to any of this. It's like her closes her eyes, maybe rolling the eyes, being a bit sad or whatever, but this is a kid that she's basically wanting to raise as her own now, and like was alright with Newt calling her mummy or mum or whatever it was. And there's just nothing. And with the whole nature of the third film being like in this prison cell with all these men who are described like rapists and sex offenders and murderers, which isn't really explored all that much in the film of itself, and I thought there was going to be a really interesting take on the horror there, that not only you're dealing with the xenomorph, but you're dealing with all these perverted and dangerous men. It happens once very briefly, but they all seem fairly tame, and we don't know what their crimes are, much about them, despite being a very interesting cast, like mainly British cast, I have to say. You could have done a lot of cool things, like not only got Ripley, you got the fucking kid there as well, because I'm sure there's going to be at least one of those men who was a fucking paedophile, which isn't to say that I'm like wanting that sort of thing to happen, but you set this up as like it's a dangerous place for Ripley to be, like she has to stay within like the medical ward because she can't trust these other men. But then it turns out she can trust all these men because they all work fucking together to try their best to get off the fucking planet and like trap the xenomorph here, who within the theatrical cut, a face hugger that came onto the ship with them, which is how everyone died, attacks a dog and it pops out the dog that way, where I believe in the director's cut, which I haven't seen for that film, it comes out of an ox, which some people say makes a bit more sense, and from what I've heard about the director's cut, it does seem to gel bits of the film together, but quite frankly, I was so pissed off and not liking that film, I don't really want to sit through and watch all of that again, even though the idea of like an xenomorph cult is enticing enough for me to at least go and check out what those scenes entail. But yeah, up until like the last 30 or 40 minutes where they're trying to basically kill the xenomorph by melting it with lead, it didn't really feel like it was a horror film because I was expecting something to happen, but it was just a lot of fucking hot air. And the plots that get set up and dropped, Ripley is just like a completely different fucking person here. I expected more danger for like a over-the-top prison cell with like some of the worst degenerates of society, kind of like an Outlast sort of scenario here, but perhaps not as much because it was still like 80s and 90s, we might have played into it a bit more. But I'm also aware that the studios had a lot of interference about what Alien 3 was supposed to be, so that might contribute to things as well, but I just had hoped a lot better for that film at that point, and it's really from this point that things start to go on a bit of a downward spiral. I had already mentioned that the whole fucking alien queen breeding impregnation thing was a fucking weird angle to take, even though the end result of the other xenomorph, like half human, half xenomorph thing, so like the other end of what Ripley would end up being, was interesting, and I wish actually that was fleshed out a bit more, that it wasn't just rushed until the very fucking end, where it clearly has some human emotions there, some guilt and fear, which made it a very harrowing bit of how it being like sucked out of the ship. Because you hadn't seen fear with a xenomorph, you've seen anger, where it's been set on fire, or the eggs with the Queen Mother, sorry, the Alien Queen, in Aliens, but you hadn't seen fear, and a xenomorph with fear is like a really interesting thing indeed. They could have done a lot more with this, like, xenomorph human hybrid, that maybe this was the version of it that could be tamed and somebody could have done something with that, or Ripley could have tried, but no, effectively it was still going to be like a killing machine, because it's very clear that this iteration of Ripley, which is a clone, and also her being a fucking clone doesn't make a lot of sense either, because they describe that it was a bit of blood that we found on some ice, which is very fucking convenient, but there was no blood. She didn't die on the ice, she got fucking malted down into nothing because she sacrificed them in that big old fucking vat of lead. But yeah, I don't think they watched that film properly, or maybe there's like a version of that film I'm not aware of, but whatever, I guess. But it's very clear that this clone of Ripley has more feelings towards the xenomorphs, because that's what she is, in part, because the clone of her had the fucking, like, alien inside, which is why she sacrificed herself, because she'd been got and that thing was eventually going to come out of her chest, so rather than going back and having them do all the fucking weird science shit they were going to do, she did the whole fucking sacrifice thing and killed it that way. So when they cloned her, it's got a clone of the xenomorph inside her as well, hence the whole fucking weird womb thing, even though we'd established that the alien queens fucking laid eggs. Yeah, fucking weird breeding shit going on there. The xenomorph with emotion could have been like a really interesting thing, but it was just left right at the end of the fucking film, and it's just a shame that that wasn't expanded a lot more. And there's a couple of character sacrifices and that just didn't make a lot of fucking sense either. There's actually a lot of that film that did not make fucking sense. I just don't think Resurrection was just a very good film, unfortunately. Even though the cast for that were pretty fucking stellar, and they did the best of what they worked with. And I do like it that we actually have a disabled character here who's got this, albeit very pimped up wheelchair, but he's not treated as something that's lesser. Sure, he needs to be carried around when he's no longer with his wheelchair, but he can hold his own. He's not really too bothered about the fact that he's disabled. Sure, there's like the fucking Rob Perlman's character who's a real fucking ableist dick about it, but he's a dick to everyone, so I suppose he gets a pass there, I guess. But he's able to hold his own, he's able to fight back and defend himself against the xenomorphs. He's not treated as lesser because he's disabled. I actually really like that. For the 1990s as well, I think that's really impressive, and that should be applauded, honestly. And I've just remembered it's one of 3 simps that aren't dickheads. I suppose there's a minor spoiler for Resurrection. But what the fuck are you doing watching this video if you haven't seen the fucking Alien films and you're not caring for spoilers? But yeah, I do like that element of it. And it does have little pockets of interest here, but it's literally fucking tiny pockets. Like, I just don't think it's particularly good, and I think, quite frankly, I wish that it fucking ended with Alien 3, which I already had a little bit of iffy problems with, but at least then it felt like a proper roundup to like the Alien story, like Ripley's story. That's it. That's the end. And then we move on to Prometheus, which I was kind of aware that people either loved or hated, and I was hoping I was going to like it at least. I do not like Prometheus at all. Remember everything that I was saying about like the tone, the setting, the themes, the worker environment, how distilled and soulless everything were? Yeah, that doesn't really happen with Prometheus. It does feel like a bit of a space opera that does kind of feel in like one place, like an Alien spiritual successor, at least with the design of the ship that they explore and the xenomorph you get within the last 5 fucking seconds of the film, and that's not an exaggeration here. And the big ass fucking tentacle monster xenomorph face hugger thing. Everything looks too new, it looks too fancy, which is a bit weird given the fact it's meant to be a fucking prequel, and yet everything looks like too high-tech and too futuristic. This is a story about a group of colonists who are trying to find the answer to how humans created, and they find little signs in like ancient hieroglyphs of this ancient civilization from beyond the stars that came to Earth and then fucked off again. And they do answer the question about how humans came into being, this alien race that are called the Engineers, because they don't actually get a proper name. That's as much as that we're working with here. And it kind of touches upon how the xenomorphs are created, because the Engineers are like share the same DNA structure to us. They had this like biological weapon thing that's clearly gone awry. The face hugger mixes in with like the spores or whatever that's in the dude, engineered dude at the end. It births the fucking xenomorph out of them. Yeah, I mean, it could have done a lot more interesting things, realising that there is no god, that the human race has literally just came about because some other alien race tried to create them, and interestingly then tried to come back to Earth to destroy them. That could have had a bit more of an interesting dialogue with it as well. But it does not feel like an Alien film at all. It just feels like a sci-fi film holding the Alien name. I suppose Prometheus doesn't actually have Alien in its title. It's called Prometheus rather than Alien Prometheus, but it's set up as an Alien prequel, and it's using Weyland-Yutani. Like, I just don't know what to fucking make of that film, to be honest. It was boring. I fell asleep during it, and keep in mind that I watched all these films in the middle of the night. That was the only one that put me to sleep, and I didn't feel I actually missed anything when I rewound the 20 or so minutes that I missed out. So, and yeah, the guy that plays David, this synth, does a great job portraying that, and he will then resurrect that role in Covenant and then be a different synth entirely. The acting, I suppose, in there is really fucking cool, and the weird fucking fingering flute scene. I wasn't too fucking fond of Covenant either. There were some almost slasher-style vibes with it, with the xenomorph, and or at least some of the other creatures, like the neomorph, is something that I only found out reading the TTRPG, which I thought were really fucking frightening. They seemed actually more dangerous than the xenomorph, just because they seemed more bestial and were just only interested in killing. They didn't seem too fond of the whole breeding element of things. And they seemed more resilient too, because you had these colonizers, different set of colonizers, that came onto this planet looking for whatever. I don't even fucking remember what they were looking for now. And these, like, fucking neomorphs are getting hammered by bullets. Sorry, the neomorphs, not xenomorphs, are getting hammered by these rifle bullets, and it takes a fucking load to get rid of them. And yet with the xenomorphs, they seem to go down a lot fucking quicker, albeit they're much tougher, stronger, and all the rest of it. Again, I would like to have seen more stuff to do with these neomorphs here, and the idea of like this like this biological weapon in the air that they're breathing in, and that was how they're going to be birthed as neomorphs. That's a really interesting idea as well. But overall, I just thought a lot of it just didn't make any sense. Why would Dr. Shaw give fucking David a body again when she saw that he was a fucking traitor and was only interested in like killing everybody off, which is really laid fucking thick into Covenant? These films just don't make a lot of sense, and the thing that really fucking frustrates me with Covenant is that it answers the question that everybody had thought of at least once: where do the xenomorphs come from? But it provides the most fucking boring answer that we made the xenomorphs, or rather an android did, because this android is insisting that humanity doesn't get a fucking second chance. It's dying, it can't support itself, why should it go around colonising the rest of the galaxy? Which, to be fair, is a valid point. And it sort of gives a very lazy metaphor existence to the xenomorphs. Like, see, they are the product of our own evil, our own hatred, our own venomous acid, like, corrupting everything, which I suppose is something you could argue was the case with all the Alien films. But doing it like this, that way, is just a bit fucking boring. And I hate the fact that this is now canon. The xenomorphs are technically descended from us. Like, it wasn't a question that needed to be answered. I think it could have been a lot better if we just never knew what they were, or they were just sort of some fucking warrior race that doesn't have a lot of intellect in terms of, like, that we could have a conversation with each other sort of thing. That it's just a scourge that just wipes things out all the time. I kind of hoped that that's where they were going to be revealed with Prometheus, that maybe the engineers concocted this sort of biological weapon to take out the xenomorphs, that was what was fighting against them. We don't know what they were running away from, but they just designed this biological weapon to take out something, I guess, that then David decided he was going to drop upon all the engineers, who most of which probably didn't know what was going on. I just think that was just a bit fucking heartless, even for a fucking android. It's just a bit fucking wank, honestly, and I just, like, I really fucking frustrated. I can't think about the xenomorphs, about how cool they are, because now they're just a fucking offshoot of humans. Which is, how fucking boring is that? Which sort of makes me feel a bit anxious going into Romulus, honestly. And honestly, when I finished watching it, I literally went, thank God, we've got a good Alien film now. Now, I can see the criticism that people have made with it, that this feels like modern Disney because Disney owns 20th Century Fox now, which they didn't when Covenant and Prometheus were made. At least I don't think it was the case with Covenant, but definitely not the case with Prometheus. Some people may seem it's a bit like Marvel Universe or like fan service. It was like that sort of level of benign. But I personally didn't feel that, partly because the bias of me watching all the Alien films back to back and just seeing how they just stood further and further away from what made the first one and second one so great, that we're now having something that feels a lot more Alien from the rustic technology. Oh, granted, it's in between 1 and 2, but remember that Prometheus and Covenant is like many years prior to the first one, and yet everything looks a lot nicer, although you could argue this is like ships from the CEO of Yutani or Wayland themselves. I can't remember which one of the two, because the two like come together at that point. So you could argue that's why they're throwing so much money in this, to make sure this all works, etc. and so forth. But Romulus, it does feel like a true successor to the what made Alien so great, what people actually love and celebrate about the Alien franchise. The sense of dread, the stalking xenomorphs, and yeah, there's by the end of it a couple more. Well, there's a lot of face huggers for sure, but it does feel like it belongs as part of the Alien setting, and I really like the fact that we have a younger perspective from this, that it's from young adults or teenagers. I'm not quite too sure how old they are, but they're probably like their late teens, early 20s, who don't want to spend the rest of their life with the company. They're like actively loathing it. They don't want to be like their parents. They actually say this, and they're constantly being fed up and being fucked over. Like our main heroine Rain here, who's a pretty cool character and definitely matures and develops, have been quite, I don't want to say cowardly, like kind of reserved and like cautious, but then again she's thrust into the role and like becomes a bit of a fucking badass of an assisted aimed weapon. It's time for her to leave, to take some time off, but then she goes to like the little like check-in thing, whatever you want to fucking call that, and said, no, sorry, we're shortage of staff on a fucking massive mining community planet. We're going to add 5 or 6 years to your work. It's like, that must fucking suck. I could not even begin to imagine just how fucking shit that must feel. I mean, ask any pensioner in the UK, I guess, but that's besides the fucking point. But it's nice to have that younger perspective, that they've got a different outlook and attitude to life. They're not wanting just to get the job done. They want to get to a different fucking star system so they can actually have a fucking life. And I respect that, and you might argue it's a bit of a plot hole with the fact that, you know, none of the fucking company chases up the fact that this ship just flies into fucking space, but that's extra money, extra resources that they're going to have to spend. It's not worth the fucking hassle, you know? And I like the energy between the cast, even though they all feel a bit fucking one note. There isn't really much development of them, apart from the aforementioned femme-presenting character. And I'm saying that because we don't know their presumed gender. So it's very much a tomboy sort of persona. It's very like tough, one of the lads sort of thing. But then the facehuggers arrive and they do a complete flip, and they're absolutely terrified, as the natural as it would be. And they get and they're the first one to get killed off. Because they're the one that gets like throat fucked by the fucking. Because they're the one that gets deep throated by the facehugger first, and the whole thing comes out the chest. You got one character whose whole persona is frightened and pregnant. One guy who's basically just racist, and another guy who's sort of doing this for his lover, who also gets killed off by the xenomorph because, yeah, unfortunate things happen. So there isn't really much of a growth with any of the characters. Probably Rain, because it's clear that she's the main protagonist and she's the one they're meant to be focusing on. There is the thing with Andy that I find very interesting. Andy is a synth who is of colour, and his whole persona, for the most part, is to protect over Rain and to do what's best for her. All of his lines involves telling one-liners and puns to make her smile and happy, which isn't really much of a character. And then when he gets like a module, which is a scientist synth on the ship that they go to, which I'll talk a bit more about in a moment, because of a much higher intelligence and programming, he then like steps up and like has all this intelligence and knowledge and what to do, etc. and so forth. So from an actor's perspective, it's a really good shift from the slightly more humane synth to the very cold and clinical, we have to get the job done with all this knowledge, which does present some very interesting dynamics where the aforementioned pregnant woman is killed by the xenomorph because he chooses not to save her because that would risk everybody dying. So that human element of things is completely wiped from the synth that was there previously. And he does manage to get his humanity back, which is nice. There's a form of like a, for Rain's sake at least, but we do get back to the one joke, one-liners sort of thing. And some people think there's a really bad portrayal of the character, and in a sense I agree with them. There isn't much development there, but maybe because I was just looking into it perhaps too much, and I sat there thinking, okay, why is this character like this? And it just couldn't help make me think that this is the first synth of colour that we've had on the film. Maybe the director and or writers was trying to present a narrative about how we portray black people in cinema throughout the years. Because many years ago, during the 20th century, like, people of colour were just like the slapstick comedy character that was just there just to provide the laughs and the gags and to be light-hearted, and didn't really have much of a personality to entertain and serve their white audience, and which would also be their role in the films as well, due to the horrible nature that is segregation and slavery during the Americas. And on the other side of things, characters are black, they're very cold, cut-off, strong, take no shit attitude, don't really have much emotional expression because society's trained them to be that sort of way thing. Again, I'm being very stereotypical with these portrayals here, and at the end of the day, this synth is still treated as a slave, even by the end of the film, where Eve rewrites his directive orders rather than being do what's best for Rain, do what's best for us. So you could argue she sets him free, but there's still a kind of, because he is still having to serve her. It's just a slightly more ethical, slightly more moral approach to things. I don't know if that's what they were going for, but that was my intention to it. But yeah, at the same time, it would have been nice if there was a bit more of a fucking personality there, rather than just being very cold and cut off, because you have it with Burke, is that the name of the one in the second film? He actually has a fucking personality. Very fucking clear that he's a synth because of how he interacts, and he's at least shows an interest in the xenomorph, similar to Ash in the first one. But it does have the awareness to be, okay, we need to fucking get rid of this, need to protect everybody sort of thing, rather than cold cut off, we are working for the company sort of thing, which is what happens to Andy because the module takes over his whole persona. Which I suppose talks to me about the elephant in the room that is the main controversy regarding Romulus, is that the scientist synth in the abandoned ship is created using generative AI because they resurrect Ash from the first one using a combination of CGI and generative AI, both with the face and mainly with the voice, which I wasn't privy to when I was watching it, because if that was the case I wouldn't have watched it at all, because I don't think generative AI in any form or fashion should be watched or viewed. I feel really bad that I had watched it, even though I really fucking enjoyed the film, which as you'll see at the end of this video, why I've capped it off the way that it did, because quite frankly, I enjoyed it as much as I did. It's like in the top 3 of my Alien films, so Alien, Aliens, and then Romulus. But there's that big fucking alien in the room that, you know, it used the generative AI, and a lot of people were focusing their disgust on the fact that they brought an actor back to life. They brought him back from the dead, and there is a really sick irony from the fact that the company in these Alien films are just treating all their staff as expendable assets, regardless to their human worth, and that's exactly what has happened here. And I feel not so antagonistic towards that, purely because from the perspective that the family gave their consent to do that, and they said that the actor's name, Ian Holm was his name, I believe, Bilbo Baggins in the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, said he would have liked to have participated in that in some way. So with the family's consent, I don't feel as bad about that, but I do feel somewhat cautious about how the concept of the generative AI was described to the family, which isn't to say they're totally naive and stupid and they wouldn't understand all of that, but you have to consider that Romulus would have been in production for quite a while, so the tech for the generative AI and the conversations might not have been so strong and forefront online and beyond as much as it is now. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know what the conversations about that were. And supposedly in the theatres, the CGI/Gen I looked even worse. And then by the time it came out on DVD, they managed to polish that stuff up, which is shocking because I thought that was like one of the worst bits of the fucking film. Because when I saw it, I thought it was a bit like uncanny like CGI work, and I thought, oh well, that looks fucking weird. Like there was a lot more cooler things they could have done with that. I think like if they wanted to give the impression that it was Ash, they could have done a whole load of vocal processing to like garble the speech, you know, to show that he'd been torn apart by the xenomorph but somehow managed to survive. Maybe make a little mould of his face or something and operate the rest using animatronics, because you do see a lot of practical effects of this. They could have done so much like alluded that it was like a version of Ash. I say a version because this one's called Rook, and it makes sense that you have the synths that look the same because of the processing in the film, but they could have, again, there's so many different things they could have done with that. They could have had a different synth involved, because the moment that you drop Ash into that, you think, okay, we now have an antagonist, we know what the deal is here. It sort of ruined that element a little bit, I feel, just because I had that knowledge, and anybody who's watched any of the Alien films would know that, okay, this synth's a bad guy, they're only interested in working for the fucking company, although with how synths are treated in the Alien films as a whole, it kind of makes sense that was going to happen anyway, but it made it so fucking apparent when they used Ash's likeliness, or the actor's likeliness, I should say. It's just really frustrating that they went down that fucking route when there was really no fucking need to. They could have, I don't know, got another fucking actor, or the actor they would have had to have used to read the line of the dialogue that was then garbled up with the generative AI voice thing. I think it's called speech that they used. Like, there are different things they could have done, and like, if you wanted to pay homage to it, fucking lean into it a lot more, and actually use the practical effects and the vocal processing things that made Alien such the fucking staple that it is, and how it pushed Hollywood and cinema forward, rather than being lazy and like riding the waves of a fucking trend that's supposedly about to burst anytime soon. It's just frustrating, and it really did like bum me out about how much I was going to enjoy the film. It was actually because I was like about to give my thoughts and opinions on the film, and I thought, I don't know whether I think this is a 4-star film or a 4.5-star film, which is a little spoiler towards the review bit at the end of the video, I guess. Or if you follow me on Letterboxd already, Lore by Night VTM, I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And then I was just reading what other people were saying about it, and I'm glad that I did, because I didn't want to make people think that I was in for the generative AI. I just didn't fucking know, and it's just a shame. And I really hope that Alien Earth doesn't do similar shit, but then again, it's fucking Disney, so what the fuck could I expect here? So I suppose I should now really get around to answering the question that's presented in the video. Is the Alien franchise any good? Meh. It's alright, I guess, as a whole. Like, taking an average emotional response to everything, from the really good, the okay, and the downright fucking shit. I think it just sort of averages out as just a very disappointing meh. Like, as I was watching through it like a film a night, like, I was getting really fucking frustrated with all of it, and Romulus was a great saving grace, and as I said, the different films have different merits to them. But, unfortunately, I feel that the film franchise as a whole is a bit meh. But, at the same time, I have not been able to stop thinking about the setting. I have not been able to stop fantasizing about the different stories and feelings you could capture with the Alien setting. The thing that I really like about it, the thing that clearly Disney were aware, or 20th Century Fox, that people liked about Alien. The isolation, the dread, the grounded level of things, the now retro look of the big bulky computers, the physical fucking buttons, having one xenomorph fucking everyone over, or a bunch of face huggers, like making it human and making it believable that there's a bunch of fucking truckers that are just doing a fucking job, or in the case of Romulus, a bunch of fucking kids who just want to go and fuck off and find a new planet, but they find this old ship and they need the bits and pieces they can to end in the cryo sleep space thing, and then fuck off. And just to interrupt myself, because I forgot to mention this, they do the whole fucking xenomorph human thing again with this, but the way they do that one is significantly more frightening than the first attempt with Resurrection, because it looks like a human, walks like a human, but it's clearly a fucking abomination. And I suppose it's a much bigger, more potent metaphor of, the whole evil monstrosity that is human colonizing space and all the rest of it. It was a very interesting twist on it, and I was concerned they were going to do an old fucking breeding kink for that again, because the Preggers woman doesn't die, I've just realised, because the fiend's inside of her, then births the fucking baby Thing, and that kills her, etc. so forth. Anyway, Alien franchise as a whole, I think it was pretty meh, but I find the setting, the themes and ideas of the Alien franchise really fucking engaging, and it's made me far more excited to run and play the Alien TTRPG, which I suppose is the ultimate goal of this little experiment of mine. If these Alien films not only can make me understand things a lot better, but also actually make me want to run the fucking Alien TTRPG, and also pursue more Alien themes in the future, which I would like to do. Now, that being said, there is a bit of a caveat out there. Some of you may be expecting me to do a Alien Isolation Let's Play on the channel, which I kind of teased out with a video here. But if you read the description of said video, I started to. But I kind of rage quitted out of that because I just thought there was a fucking huge bullshit moment, honestly, with the Xenomorph AI. I talk a little bit about it in the description, but just to cover it here, I think it was a bit unfair, and if that's how it was going to handle like detection based stuff, I just didn't want any fucking part of it. But the little bit I did play, I really did enjoy. The other Alien games aren't particularly good. I'm aware of the Alien Resurrection PS1 game being something of a mixed bag, which I may look into. But I would like to see what other aspects of the Alien franchise I can enjoy next. Maybe have a look at some of the video games, maybe read the books. I was made aware last night that there's actually a massive collection of comics I could read. And as I'm kind of like drip feeding comic stuff into the channel, I may want to have a look at that. But let me know your thoughts and opinions down below of what you think I should cover next and what you think of the Alien films. Which one is your favourite? Which one is your least favourite? And why is it Prometheus? I'm joking. If you loved Prometheus, I genuinely enough to know why. Not so I can just like baffle the oddity, but there may be something that I've missed here as well. And before I wrap things up properly and show you what I wrote on my Letterboxd account, I actually wrote the same reviews on my Instagram and also the YouTube community posts tab. And regarding that, I want to give a little shout out to, I'm going to get your name wrong, for which I'm sorry, Valkarma, I believe the pronunciation is, Valkarma 7. Because with every Alien film I left a review of on the YouTube community post, they left their thoughts and opinions of it as well, and they also said that I was glad that I liked something or not, just general stuff like that. And there was actually a small little part of me putting the reviews there where I was expecting and kind of anticipating their thoughts on that as well, because clearly they are very enthusiastic about the Alien franchise, hence them commenting under each one. And it was just a nice little spark of joy that I had, especially with some of the shittier Alien films that I enjoyed reading the responses. So thank you very much, Valkarma 7. So, with that out of the way, let me know all your thoughts and opinions about the Alien franchise below. Let me know which of the films is your favourite, which is your least favourite, the books and the comics and anything else that I may have missed out that you think I may be into as well. And if you're curious about playing the TTRPG, I'm going to leave a link for this down in the description for you to go and play below, so you can go and play and run this for your friends. It's a really simple system to use. It uses your standard 6-sided dice. Now, if you go and purchase it with that specific link, I get some of the money back because I'm affiliate on DriveThruRPG, which is where the shop is, and I get some of the money back that way, which means that you get books, I get books, and you get content like this for free, which is absolutely based pog as shit. But if you've got that already and want to get something else, be it a game on screen, some cards, or another game entirely, go find the affiliate code, paste it in the URL before you add to the cart, and some of that coinage is going to come my way as well, which is absolutely amazing. Now, if you can't do that, that is absolutely fine, because I know times are hard on all of us, and that sort of stuff is really difficult for most people at the moment due to the world being what it is. So if you can do that, that's absolutely great. If you can't do that, that's absolutely fine too. But what you should definitely do regardless is give the video a cheeky little thumbs up, subscribe to the Lore by Night channel, and share this video with any and everyone who loves what I do, and I'll see you on the next upload, whatever that may well be for you. And until next time, from Holly and I, farewell.